Some hunger makes a sound before it ever speaks. It is in the scrape of a boot against dust when pride has walked too far, in the trembling hand that reaches where it should not, in the silence of a person who has run out of respectable choices. Folks like to judge a theft by the thing taken, but the Lord and the prairie both know a stolen egg can weigh as heavy as a sack of gold. This is the story of a woman who reached into a henhouse with shame burning her throat, and of the cowboy who looked close enough to see need instead of sin. Olive Chandler was crouched in the henhouse behind Levi Drake's south barn when the rooster screamed like Judgment Day. She had one brown egg already tucked inside the pocket of her faded calico dress, and her fingers closing around a second, warm from the straw, when the door banged open and hard Texas sunlight fell across the floorboards. A red hen burst past her shoulder. Olive jerked back so quick she struck her elbow against a cracked blue tin egg cup hidden in her apron, the little cup she carried from hunger to hunger like a foolish promise that one day there would be enough to fill it. Levi Drake stood in the doorway with a feed sack over one shoulder and a shotgun resting loose in his other hand. He did not raise it. Olive froze in the straw, her bonnet string hanging untied, her cheeks hollow, her eyes too proud for the tears standing in them. Dust drifted through the sunbeam between them. Somewhere beyond the barn, cattle bawled under the hot May wind, and a pump handle squealed near the wash shed. Levi looked at her hand, then at her face. "That egg got a name?" he asked. Olive's fingers opened. The egg rested in her palm, pale brown, harmless as morning. "No, sir." "Then I reckon it belongs to my hens." "I reckon it does." She tried to stand, but her knees had gone watery from walking 12 miles on an empty stomach and sleeping 2 nights under mesquite trees. The boards tilted. She caught herself on the nesting box, and 2 hens scolded her like old church women. Levi stepped inside, slow enough not to spook her. He was broad through the shoulders, sun-browned, with a hat brim pulled low and a week's worth of dark beard on his jaw. A heel scar cut through his left eyebrow, leaving a pale line that made one eye look sterner than the other. His shirt was clean, but worn thin at the cuffs. His boots carried the dust of a man who had been riding fence before breakfast. "What were you fixing to do with them?" he asked. Olive lifted her chin. "Eat them." His eyes did not soften, not in any way a woman could count on. "Raw? If I had to." He was quiet a moment. A horse stamped in the shade outside, leather creaking. Olive heard her own stomach turn hard and shameful. Then Levi reached past her, took 3 more eggs from the nesting box, and set them into the feed sack. Olive stared. He nodded toward the open door. "Come on. I can leave the one in my pocket. I know. I ain't a thief by trade." "I know that too. You don't know anything about me." Levi held the door wider. "I know thieves by trade don't look like they're about to apologize to a hen." She looked away because that nearly broke her. "Before we go further, tell me where you are watching from. If this story touches something tender in you, like it, share it with someone who loves a quiet frontier tale, and subscribe so you can come back to the porch with us again." Olive stepped out into the yard with the egg still in her pocket and the little blue cup knocking against her apron. Drake Ranch spread around her in all the hard, honest shapes of Texas work. The main house sat low under a live oak, its porch sagging on one side, and its windows washed clean but bare. A windmill turned slow beyond the corrals. Horses nosed each other over rails silvered by sun. The land rolled west in dry grass and mesquite, wide enough to swallow a sorrel hole and still leave room for cattle. Levi walked ahead of her without looking back, as if trusting her not to run. That made the shame worse. At the kitchen door he paused and scraped his boots on the iron bar. "You got a name?" She had almost said no. A name could be chased. A name could be repeated in a store where flour came dear and gossip came free. But hunger had already stolen too much of her, and she would not let it take that. "Olive Chandler." He opened the door. "Levi Drake?" "I know." He glanced over his shoulder. She swallowed. Your brand's on half the cattle south of Mill Creek. Folks know your name, that right? They say you don't hire women. They say a lot. The kitchen smelled of coffee gone bitter on the stove, bacon grease cooling in a pan, and ashes from a fire nobody had tended with care. A rough table stood near the window. 2 plates sat in the wash basin. Flour dust hardened on the board by the stove. A stack of mending lay untouched on a chair, and a child's carved horse, one ear broken, rested beside a tin cup on the mantel. Olive saw all of it in one glance, because women with no home notice homes closely. They notice what is loved, what is neglected, what is missing. Levi set the feed sack down and took the eggs out one by one. Sit. I'm not your dog. His mouth tightened, not with anger exactly. More like he had stepped on an old nail in memory. Chairs there whether you're a dog or the governor. Olive stayed standing. Levi took the skillet, set it back on the stove, and stirred the embers. He moved stiffly through the kitchen, as if he knew how to boil coffee and burn meat, but not how to make a room glad of supper. He cracked 4 eggs into the pan. Olive watched the whites spread and tremble, and the smell made her throat ache. You have family? He asked. No. People expecting you? No. Someone after you? She looked at the door. Not that I know of. That ain't the same as no. No, it ain't. He let that stand. The eggs hissed. He salted them with 2 pinches from a chip bowl, slid them onto a plate, and set it on the table. Ee. Olive looked at the plate, then at him. I don't have money. I didn't ask for money. I want take charity. Then don't. He leaned one shoulder against the doorframe and folded his arms. I got 37 hens. 2 hens who can rope but can't wash a plate without looking betrayed. A garden gone half wild, and a house that's been running on coffee and neglect. You wanted eggs. Stay and work for them instead. The words settled between them, plain as fence wire. Olive heard no tenderness in them, no romance, no rescue dressed up pretty, just a bargain with dirt on its boots. She could endure that. For how long? She asked. Till you've paid for what you eat, or till you decide my hens are too judgmental. Despite herself, a breath that was nearly a laugh slipped out. It died quickly. What work? Can you cook? Can you cook? I zess. Wash? I zess. Men. She looked at the torn cuff on his sleeve, the missing button, the old blood stain near one seam from a wound long past washing out. Better than whoever's been trying. He glanced down at his cuff, as if surprised to find evidence against himself. Garden. Yes, chickens. I know not to rob them before noon if that's what you're asking. There. This time he almost smiled, but it did not stay. Eat first, he said. Then we'll speak wages. Olive sat because her legs gave her no more room for pride. She picked up the fork. The first bite of egg was too hot, but she did not care. She ate slowly at first, trying to maintain some dignity, then quicker when her body remembered it was allowed to want. Levi turned his back and busied himself at the stove, giving her privacy from the shame of being hungry. That was the first kindness, not the food, the looking away. When the plate was clean, he poured coffee into a tin cup and set it near her hand. It's bad, he said. She drank it anyway. It was strong enough to shoe a mule, and bitter as a banknote. It is, she said. He looked at her then, and his eyes changed by the smallest measure. Outside, a boy's voice called, Pa! Jasper put burrs in my sock again. Another voice shouted, did not. A third, smaller voice wailed, he did mine too. Olive stiffened. Levi closed his eyes for half a second, the way a man does when a storm he expected arrives early. The kitchen door flew open, and 3 children tumbled in with dust, heat, and argument. The tallest boy was about 10, narrow and serious, with Levi's dark eyes and a cowlick that stood up like it had chosen independence. The next was 8 or so, freckled, wiry, and already grinning trouble. The youngest was a little girl of 5 with brown braids and a face sticky from sorghum. All three stopped when they saw Olive. The little girl hid behind Levi's leg. The freckled boy looked at the empty plate. "She ate our eggs." Olive stood so fast the chair scraped. Levi's voice cut low. "Jasper, what? Did she?" The oldest boy watched Olive, as if trying to decide whether she was danger or core. The little girl peered around denim, eyes wide. Olive reached into her pocket and placed the stolen egg on the table. "I took one. I was wrong." The children stared at it. Levi did too. Then Olive untied her apron and took out the blue tin egg cup. It was dented on one side, with paint worn from the rim and a little white flower still visible beneath the scratches. She set the egg in it carefully. "This cup was my mother's," she said, though she had not meant to tell them anything. "When I was small, she used to put the first egg of spring in it and say, 'There now, the world's remembered us.' I suppose I carried it too long and forgot the world does not owe remembering." The room went still. The youngest girl stepped away from Levi's leg. "A sad cup?" "Yes," Olive said. "Today it is." Levi cleared his throat. "Boys, this is Miss Chandler. She'll be working here a while." Jasper's eyes sharpened. "Because she stole? Because we need help?" The older boy looked from Olive to Levi. "We don't need help." Levi's jaw worked. "Micah, we don't." The boy's hurt sat right on top of his anger, thin as milk skin. Olive knew that kind of hurt, the kind that bites before it begs. "I can leave," she said. "No," Levi answered. "Just one word." Micah stared at his father. Something passed between them, old and unfinished. Then the boy turned and walked out, letting the door slam hard enough to rattle the plates. Jasper followed slower, looking back at Olive with curiosity. The little girl stayed. "What's your name?" Olive asked gently. "Ruthie." "That's a fine name. My mama had a blue cup." Levi went rigid. Ruthie touched the edge of Olive's egg cup. Only hers had roses. Olive looked at Levi, but his face had gone set as a locked trunk. "Then she had good taste," Olive said. Ruthie smiled a little. "Can you make biscuits?" "I asked. Soft ones." "I asked. Soft ones. If the flour is kind, and the stove behaves." Ruthie considered this. "Our stove is mean. That can be corrected." Levi gave a quiet snort, not quite laughter, and then looked annoyed with himself for making it. That evening, Olive learned the terms of Drake Ranch. From the bottom up, she would sleep in the small back room off the kitchen, once used for preserves and now stacked with empty jars, a broken cradle, and 2 trunks nobody seemed willing to open. She would cook morning and night, wash, mend, tend the kitchen garden, collect eggs properly, and mind Ruthie when Levi and the boys were out. In exchange, she would have meals, a bed, and $8 a month if she lasted past 2 weeks. "If I don't," she asked, "then you'll have earned what you ate, and the egg I took. You can pay that first." "How?" He nodded toward the henhouse. "By collecting tomorrow without stealing." The back room smelled of dust, apples long gone, and cedar from the trunks. Olive opened the one narrow window and shook out a quilt stiff from disuse. Her hands trembled when she laid her few possessions on the shelf: a comb with missing teeth, a needle case, 2 handkerchiefs, 1 spare pair of stockings, and the blue tin egg cup. She held the cup a moment before setting it near the window. Her reflection in dark glass looked older than 26. Her cheeks were too sharp. Her mouth had learned not to expect tenderness. A bruise yellowed near her wrist where Mr. Pritchard, the storekeeper in Red Willow, had grabbed her when she refused to sign away the last of her father's tools for half their worth. She had left that town before dawn with nothing but her bundle, the egg cup, and a letter from a dead mother folded under her stays. She pressed her fingers to the bruise until pain steadied her. In the kitchen, Levi spoke low to his children. She could not make out the words, only the shape of them. Micah's voice rose once. Levi's answered, flat and weary. A chair scraped. Ruthie cried softly for 3 breaths, and stopped, as if she had learned crying did not change the weather. Olive took off her bonnet and hung it on a nail. Then she rolled up her sleeves and went to wash the dishes. By dawn, she had the stove persuaded into a steady flame. The kitchen woke under her hands. Coffee was poured out and made fresh, not boiled to anger. Flour met lard in a chipped yellow bowl. She used cold fingers and patience, folding biscuit dough the way her mother had shown her in a cabin far east of any Texas dust. She found molasses in the pantry, bacon under a cloth, and a sack of beans gone weevily at the top. She threw out what must be thrown out, and saved what could be saved. Levi entered at first light with wet hair from the pump and suspenders hanging loose over his shirt. He stopped on the threshold. The table was set, not fancy, just set. Tin plates straight, cups turned upright. A jar of wildflowers Ruthie had gathered some other day placed in the middle after Olive trimmed the dead stems. The broken-eared wooden horse sat beside Levi's plate, where it had been on the mantel, dust wiped clean from its mane. His eyes went to it. "I didn't know if it belonged elsewhere," Olive said. "It's fine." The boys came in hungry and suspicious. Ruthie came barefoot, clutching a rag doll by one leg. Jasper bit into a biscuit and stared at Olive. "Well?" Ruthie demanded. He chewed. His freckled face changed against his will. Soft. Ruthie beamed as if she had made them herself. Micah ate without praise, but he ate 4. Levi took 1 biscuit, then another. When Olive rose to refill coffee, he reached for the pot first and poured hers before his own. The movement was awkward, almost begrudging, as if manners had been stored somewhere in him and brought out stiff with disuse. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. After breakfast, Olive went to the henhouse with Ruthie skipping beside her and Jasper trailing because he had been told not to. "You got to watch Red Mary," Jasper said. "She pecks. I've met worse than Red Mary." "What's worse?" "Men who think a woman hungry enough to ask for credit has misplaced her morals." Jasper frowned. "That a riddle?" "No. Just a fact you don't need yet." Ruthie held the basket with both hands. Olive showed her how to slide fingers under a hen without frightening her, how to tank the bird because gentleness costs nothing, how to turn an egg to check for cracks. Red Mary did peck. Olive did not flinch. Jasper looked impressed despite trying not to. When the basket was half full, Olive took the first egg and placed it in the blue cup she had brought along. "What's that for?" Ruthie asked. "A habit. Eyes. The world remembering us." Olive looked across the yard. Levi was saddling a bay horse, his profile cut against the morning. Micah stood nearby holding a bridle, both of them silent, in a way that had sharp edges. "My bay, just beginning to," Olive said. By the 3rd day, the ranch had begun resisting and accepting her in equal measure. The pump handle tore a blister across her palm. The stove smoked whenever the wind came from the north. Micah left his plate dirty on purpose, and Jasper put a frog in the flour barrel until Olive caught him carrying it by one leg and made him apologize to both the frog and the flour. Ruthie followed Olive everywhere. "Why don't you wear colors?" the child asked, while Olive mended a shirt under the porch shade. "Colors cost money. Pa says money costs too." "That is true in more ways than he likely meant." "Do you have a pa?" "I did." "Where is he?" "Buried under a cedar tree near a creek that used to flood every March." Ruthie leaned against Olive's knee. "My mama's in the Hill Cemetery." "I'm sorry. Pa doesn't talk about her unless Reverend says her name." Olive's needle paused. From the corral, Levi's voice snapped at a horse and then softened at once. He could gentle a nervous mare with one hand and wound a room with one silence. Olive had seen such men before, but not always cruel ones. Some men went quiet because they were full of meanness. Some because grief had built walls where doors ought to be. That afternoon, a storm gathered in the west. Texas sky turned greenish at the hem, and the cattle shifted uneasy. Levi and the boys rode out to bring in a stray calf from low ground before the creek rose. Olive took in washing, latched the henhouse, and found Ruthie standing at the porch rail, face pale. "Storms don't ask permission here," Olive said, bringing the child inside. "Mama died in rain." The words came so small, Olive almost missed them. She knelt. "Was she sick?" Ruthie shook her head. "Wagon broke. Horse scared. Pa came home with blood on his coat." Olive's chest tightened. The first hard drops hit the roof like thrown beans. Wind drove dust under the door. Ruthie clapped hands over her ears, and Olive drew her close without asking. The child came stiff at first, then melted with a sound that was not quite a sob. Olive sat on the kitchen floor with Ruthie in her lap and told her how thunder was only clouds, moving furniture in heaven, and rain was the sky washing its face after a long dusty day. She knew it was foolish. She knew grief did not believe easy stories. But Ruthie listened. The door burst open near dusk. Levi came in soaked, carrying Jasper under one arm like a sack, and dragging Micah by the collar with the other hand. All three were muddy. Jasper was laughing until he saw Ruthie and stopped. Micah's lip was bleeding. "Calf's in," Levi said. "You're bleeding," Olive said to Micah. "It's nothing." Then it one object to washing. He glared but sat when Levi pointed at the chair. Olive cleaned the cut with boiled water while thunder shook the window. Micah tried not to wince. His eyes kept flicking toward Ruthie, who had fallen asleep on a folded quilt near the stove. "She cried?" he asked. "A little. Pa don't like crying." Levi, hanging wet slickers by the door, went still. Olive dabbed the cut dry. "Most people don't like it. That doesn't mean it has no business coming." Micah swallowed. "Mama cried before she died." The room tightened. Levi turned. "Micah, I want to know." Levi's face was hard, but Olive saw the fear beneath it. Not fear of the question, fear of breaking open. "She was scared," he said at last. His voice had gravel in it. "But she kept telling you boys to hold Ruthie tight." "She was brave." Micah's eyes filled, furious at themselves. "You never said." "I couldn't. That ain't the same as shouldn't." Levi took the blow without reply. Olive placed a clean rag in Micah's hand. "Hold that there." Micah pressed it to his lip and looked away. Supper was quiet, but that night, after the children slept, Levi came into the kitchen while Olive was banking the stove. He held a small rose-painted china egg cup in his hand, cracked clean down one side, and mended with yellowed glue. Olive knew without asking. "My wife's," he said. "She waited. Clara used it for Ruthie when she was little. Soft-boiled eggs, pinch of salt. Ruthie would eat with a spoon smaller than my tongue." His big fingers curled around the little cup, as if it weighed more than saddle leather. "Ruthie mentioned it," Olive said. "I put it away after the funeral." Grief puts away strange things. His eyes lifted to hers. She should not have said it with such knowing. It invited questions. He asked none. Instead, he set the rose cup on the mantel beside the broken-eared horse. "Figured it can stand there a while." Olive nodded, throat tight. The lamp burned low between them. Rain whispered down the chimney, as somewhere in the walls a board creaked with damp. "Why were you on my place?" Levi asked. There it was. Olive wiped her hands on her apron. "I was walking west." "From where?" "Red Willow. That's more than 12 miles. I did not begin yesterday." He waited in the manner of men used to cattle and weather, patient only because pushing did no good. "My father died last winter," she said. "Left debts I didn't know about, and tools worth less than hope. I worked at Pritchard's store, sewing, keeping books, sweeping. When he found I had no kin, he decided my wages could be paid in meals and remarks." Levi's jaw hardened. "I left when he tried to make me sign a paper saying my father owed twice what he did. I took my needle case, my mother's letter, and that blue cup. He kept the rest, said if I stepped back in town, he'd have the sheriff call it theft. Was it? No, Levi's gaze held hers. I believe you. That was the first thing he gave her. That cost him something, though she did not yet know why. Trust from a man who had buried his softness is never free. Olive looked down. You ought not. You found me with your eggs. One wrong don't make every accusation true. She wanted to answer lightly, could not. He took his hat from the peg. Pritchard ever come here? You let me speak first. I can speak for myself. I expect you can. Let me stand there while you do. That was different. That did not steel her voice to make him noble. It put a wall at her back. She nodded once. The next weeks passed in work so steady that worry had to walk alongside it, instead of sitting on Olive's chest. Mornings began before sunup. She collected eggs with Ruthie, set the first one in the blue cup on the kitchen sill while coffee brewed, and counted the rest into baskets. Levi noticed. He said nothing, but after a few days he began leaving a small pencil stub by the sill so she could mark tallies on a scrap of feed paper. She sold extra eggs in mason jars packed with straw to Mrs. Bell at the boarding house, trading some for sugar and some for coins that went into a tobacco tin behind the flour. She weeded the garden until beans found room to breathe. She cut Levi's shirts down from mica and patched Jasper's knees with cloth from a ruined pillowcase. She taught Ruthie to braid rags into a mat and not to fear the far rumble of thunder. Levi repaired the porch step she chipped on the first week. When she burned her wrist on the stove, he brought salve without fuss and stood there until she used it. When the nights stayed warm, he moved a cot onto the back porch for himself because the house was small and the walls thinner than propriety. He never made a show of his honor. He simply lived it, which was harder to mistrust. Still, the town talked. Olive felt it first at Mill Creek Mercantile, 3 Saturdays after her arrival. Levi drove her and Ruthie in the wagon to buy flour, lamp oil, and calico thread dot. The store smelled of molasses, coffee beans, leather, and judgment. Mrs. Abel from the church stopped speaking when Olive entered. 2 young women near the ribbon shelf turned to study her dress. Mr. Tully, the clerk, looked past Olive to Levi. Didn't know you were hiring inside help, Mr. Drake. Levi set a sack of cornmeal on the counter. Now you do. Tully's eyes slid to Olive. You from around here, miss? Not anymore, Olive said. A woman behind the stove whispered, that's the one he caught in his henge sow. Ruthie's hand tightened around Olive's skirt. Levi turned his head slowly. The store grew quiet, except for the tick of a clock. You got something to ask me, Mrs. Abel, he said. The woman colored. I only heard. You heard I found a hungry woman. That's all you heard from me. Mrs. Abel's mouth pinched. A widower must be careful what kind of example he sets. Olive stepped forward before Levi could answer. Her heart beat hard, but her voice stayed level. Then let the example be this. I took what wasn't mine because I was hungry and ashamed. Mr. Drake required work instead of calling the sheriff. If mercy is dangerous to children, I suppose church has changed since I last sat in one. No one moved. Jasper, who had been picking at a barrel of nails by the door, whispered, Lord. Levi looked at Olive with something like alarm and pride wrestling in his face. Mr. Tully cleared his throat. Tell me $2.12. Levi paid. Olive lifted the flour herself, though he reached for it. Outside, she set it in the wagon, and only then realized her hands were shaking. Levi came to stand beside her. You all right? No, you looked it. I have had practice looking what I am not. He leaned against the wagon wheel, eyes on the dusty street. Mrs. Abel's husband ran off to Galveston with a woman half his age. She keeps her shame alive by feeding it other folks' names. That should make me kinder toward her. Does it? No. His mouth twitched. Ruthie climbed into the wagon and set Olive's brew cup carefully on the seat. Olive had brought it to trade eggs and forgotten it On the store counter. Ruthie must have fetched it. Can't forget the remembering cup, the child said. Levi's expression gentled so quickly Olive had to look away. On the ride home, dust lifted behind the wagon, and the town shrank to a thin line of roofs. Levi held the reins loose. Ruthie fell asleep against Olive's sigh. Jasper rode in back with the supplies, humming through his teeth. Micah sat up front, silent as always. After a mile, he spoke without turning. "You shamed Mrs. Abel." "No," Olive said. "I answered her. There is a difference. She won't know it, likely not." Micah considered this. "My mama answered people." Levi's hands tightened on the reins. "She did," he said. Micah nodded as if storing that away. The first trouble came not from gossip, but from money. A banker named Edson Pike rode out in a black coat too clean for the road, and a bowler hat that made him look like a crow trying to be a gentleman. Olive saw him from the garden, dismounting near the porch while Levi came from the barn wiping grease off his hands. They spoke in the shade. Pike smiled often. Levi did not smile once. Olive could not hear everything, only pieces. Payment due. Drought took half. Extension was last year's courtesy. North pasture deed. Levi's face went still in the way she had come to know. Meant something inside him had begun bleeding. That evening he ate little. After supper, he went to the barn and stayed there long after dark. Olive washed dishes slowly, then made coffee and carried it out. The barn smelled of hay, horse sweat, dust, and leather, warmed by the day. Levi stood at the workbench under a lantern, mending a bridle that did not need mending. She set the cup near his hand. "Coffee, thank you." She did not leave. He worked the all-through leather. Pike says, if I miss the August note, he'll press for the north pasture. Can he? Yes. What's in the north pasture? Grass. Water in a dry year. My best calving ground. He pulled the thread hard. Clara's father sold me the first 100 acres. I added the rest after we married. Thought I was building something that couldn't be taken. Olive touched the edge of the workbench. Things built with debt can always be threatened by men with clean cuffs. He looked at her. That from experience? Yes. The lantern flame bent in a draft. I could sell stock, he said. Wrong time. Prices are low. I could send Misa to my sister near San Antonio. Hire less. Eat less. You already eat like a man apologizing to his own table. That earned the faintest look. Olive reached into her apron and took out the tobacco tin. She opened it. Coins glinted dull in the lantern light. What's that? Egg money. After replacing kitchen goods, sugar, lamp oil, and thread, this remains $4.62. Olive, you said I work for them. I have. I'm not taking your wages. I'm not offering wages. I'm offering accounting. She set the tin down. The hens can earn if managed properly. So can the garden. Mrs. Bell will buy pickled eggs. The railroad cookhouse in Abilene buys preserves when they can get them. If we plant late squash, dry beans, and put up peach butter from the old trees by the creek, it will not save a pasture alone, but it will make the house pull with the herd instead of against it. Levi stared at her. What? She asked. Nobody said we in this barn in a long while. Olive felt heat rise in her face. I meant the ranch. I know what you meant. He looked down at the coins and closed the tin gently. We'll keep account, he said. Not charity, not wages. Account. She nodded. Then he took a small leather book from a drawer and opened to a clean page. At the top, in careful block letters, he wrote, hens, garden, house. Under it, he wrote Olive's figures. From that night on, the Drake kitchen became a place of industry. Olive rose earlier. Levi built shelves in the cool room. Jasper washed jars for a penny a dozen and complained like an old man, but he did them. Micah hauled water without being asked. Ruthie drew crooked flowers on scraps of paper to paste on jars of peach butter, solemnly declaring it made them worth more. Levi began bringing Olive news from town. Egg prices, sugar costs, which ranch wife needed mending, which boarding house paid on time. He listened when she spoke of accounts, and if he disagreed, he did so like a man considering whether, not dismissing a woman. Their days made small bridges. Coffee kept warm when he came in late. A plate set aside for her when she missed supper tending a sick hen. His coat left by the kitchen door on cold mornings without a word. Her mending basket moved from the back room to the parlor where the light was better. One evening, Levi came in with a cut along his forearm from barbed wire. He held it under the pump, jaw tight, blood running to his wrist. "You need stitches," Olive said. "I need supper. You need stitches first. I've had worse." "That is not a medical argument." He sat because she pointed to the chair. She threaded a needle, cleaned a wound, and worked by lamplight. His arm was warm under her fingers, muscled from years of rope and reins. He watched her face, not the needle. "You stitched men before?" he asked. "My father, after a saw slip. A neighbor boy after a dog bite. Myself once, where, my side." His eyes changed. "How?" She tied a knot carefully. A man at Pritchard's store thought refusal was an invitation to anger. Levi said nothing. The silence was so deep she heard the flame tremble. "It was a long time ago," she said, though it had not been. "No, it wasn't." She looked at him then. He had understood not the calendar but the wound. "I left before worse," she said. "Good, one word if I say more. I'll want to ride to Red Willow tonight." That would help no one. No, but his hand, the uninjured one, curled slowly into a fist on the table. She finished the bandage. "There, try not to tear it open, being stubborn. I don't know another way to be," I noticed. His mouth softened. "You always this sharp after dark?" "Only when men bleed on my clean towels." He looked at the towel, then back at her. "I'll wash it. You'll ruin it, then by one. With what money?" He exhaled. "You do know where to cut?" She smiled before she could stop herself. He saw it. The room altered not boldly, but like a lamp turned up one notch. Neither spoke. Ruthie cried out in her sleep from the next room, and the moment folded away. Olive went to her, and Levi stayed at the table, looking at the bandage on his arm like it had told him something. Summer deepened. Heat pressed the roof. Grasshoppers worried the garden. A calf took fever and lived because Olive sat up 2 nights with Levi, rubbing its legs and feeding it from a bottle, while Jasper slept on a hay bale and Micah pretended not to care. In those nights, Levi told her pieces of himself. He had come to Texas at 19 with 1 horse, 1 bedroll, and anger enough to keep him warm. His father had drunk away land in Tennessee. His mother had died worn out by forgiving. Levi had sworn never to owe any man enough that the man could own his sleep. "And yet Pike has your north pasture," Olive said softly. "Some vows get tested by drought. Some get broken by pride." He looked at her across the stall. "You calling me proud?" "Ah, yes." He rubbed the calf's neck. "Fair. That was all. No defense." She valued that more than an apology he did not owe. He asked about her mother. Olive took the letter from her pocket, the paper soft from years of folding. She did not hand it to him, but she read one line in the lantern hush. "When the world forgets you, Olive, do one useful thing, and make it remember by morning." Levi listened as if scripture had been read. She wrote that when fever had nearly taken her voice, and the cup, she put an egg in it the day before she died. "We had almost nothing left," she said. "If I could eat, I could endure." Levi's eyes moved to the blue cup on an upturned crate beside the lantern. Olive had brought it with 2 boiled eggs for their supper. "You endured a long time," he said. She peeled 1 egg slowly. "So have you," the calf breathed. The barn settled. Outside, stars scattered over Texas like salt over black bread. After that, no one could have said they were courting. They were not. Levi did not bring flowers from the creek bank. Olive did not sigh at windows. Their affection, if that was what it was becoming, hid in work clothes. He sharpened her garden hoe without being asked. She patched the lining of his winter coat in July because good cloths should not wait for cold to be valued. He built a small shelf above the kitchen sill just wide enough for 2 egg cups, her blue tin one and Clara's rose china one. She began placing the first egg of each day in one cup or the other, alternating. Ruthie called it fair. Jasper called it foolish. Micah watched and said nothing, but once Olive found him standing before the shelf, touching the broken ear of the wooden horse, his face unguarded. The almost leaving came on a Tuesday. Olive returned from Mrs. Bell's boarding house with $14 owed for preserves and mending, only to find Sheriff Harlan in the Drake yard with Mr. Pritchard beside him. Pritchard was thinner than Olive remembered, with oiled hair parted too straight and a mustache trimmed sharp. He wore a gray suit despite the heat and carried a folded paper like a weapon. At the sight of him, Olive's breath went out. Levi stood near the porch, one hand resting on the rail. The children were behind him. Micah held Ruthie's shoulder. Pritchard smiled. There she is. Miss Chandler, you have caused me inconvenience. Olive stepped from the wagon. I have caused you distance. I meant to keep it. Sheriff Harlan looked uncomfortable. He was a square man with a sunburned nose, not unkind but too used to papers. Miss Chandler, Mr. Pritchard says you left Red Willow owing debt and carrying property belonging to his store. My needle case was mine. My clothes were mine. My mother's cup was mine. The only thing I took from any man here was an egg, and Mr. Drake has put me to work for it. Pritchard's eyes flickered. He had not expected laughter from Jasper at that. This is no jest, Pritchard said. Her father owed me $43. She signed an agreement to work it off. I signed nothing. You would have, had you not fled. Levi's voice was quiet. A paper not signed is wind. Pritchard's smile tightened. Mr. Drake, I advise caution. A woman found stealing once might steal again. Olive felt the yard tilt, not from fear of jail, from the sight of Ruthie hearing it, from Micah's eyes going hard, from Leva's name being dragged because he had fed her. She saw, in one terrible flash, what staying might cost them. More gossip, legal trouble, Pike hearing weakness, children mocked, Levi forced to defend her again and again until resentment took root where kindness had been. She lifted her chin. Sheriff, I will come with you to settle the matter. Levi turned. No, it is my matter, not alone. Pritchard gave a soft chuckle, touching Olive-faced Levi. You have a banknote due, children listening, and land at risk. Do not spend reputation on me. Levi stepped down from the porch. I decide what I spend. She lowered her voice. Levi, please. His eyes held hers. There was fear in them now, naked and human, not fear of Pritchard. Fear that she had already gone inside herself to a place no one could follow. He came close enough that only she heard his next words. Don't run hungry. Simple. Rough. Nearly nothing. It stopped her where speeches would have failed. Her throat closed. Levi turned to the sheriff. Harlan, you know me. I do. You know my dead wife's brother in Red Willow, Samuel Bell. I know him. Wire him. Ask about Silas Pritchard's papers. Ask how many women left his employ owing money that grew after they said no. Pritchard's face changed. Levi saw it. So did the sheriff, Olive whispered. How did you know? I didn't, Levi said. But men like him don't sharpen one knife. The sheriff took off his hat and wiped his forehead. Mr. Pritchard, I reckon we'll ride into town and send that wire before I take anybody anywhere. Pritchard sputtered. This is irregular. S.O. is chasing a woman across counties on unsigned paper. Harlan mounted. Pritchard had no graceful choice but to follow. Before he did, he looked at Olive with poison in his smile. You think a ranch house makes you clean? Levi moved so fast, Olive barely saw it. He did not strike him. He only stepped between them, close enough that Pritchard stumbled back. "She was clean before she crossed my line," Levi said. "Remember that when you speak her name." Pritchard left pale. Olive stood in the dust after the riders disappeared, her bundle of coins still tied at her waist, her hands cold despite the heat. Ruthie ran to her first and wrapped both arms around her. Jasper followed, pretending he had only come to inspect the wagon wheel. Micah stood a few feet away. "You were gonna leave," he said. Olive touched Ruthie's braid. "I thought it might help." "It wouldn't." "No." Micah shook his head, eyes bright with anger. He refused to spend on tears. "People leave and the house gets worse." Levi flinched. Olive looked at the boy and saw how grief had made him old without making him fair. "I am sorry," she said. "I won't choose for the house without asking again." Micah gave one hard nod. That was forgiveness from him, or near enough. That night, Olive packed anyway. Not to leave, she told herself, only to know she could. The back room had become too dear. Her comb on the shelf, her shawl on the peg, the quilt smelling now of sun and soap instead of dust. Want had crept in while she was cooking beans and counting eggs. Want for a table, for Ruthie's hand in hers, for Jasper's foolish songs, for Micah's trust, slow as winter sunrise, for Levi's quiet presence on the porch after the children slept. Want was dangerous. A hungry body steals eggs. A hungry heart steals hope. She folded her spare stockings. A knock sounded on the doorframe. Levi stood there, hat in hand. "You going?" "No." He looked at the bundle. "I was remembering how." He nodded, as if that made sense to him. "I keep a saddle packed in the barn sometimes." "You do?" Less now. She sat on the edge of the cot. "I don't know how to stay without fearing the cost." Levi leaned against the jamb. "I don't know how to ask someone to stay without fearing the answer." That was the line that said less than it meant. The house breathed around them. Children asleep, crickets outside, a lamp burning low enough to make shadows kind. Olive looked at him. "What answer would you fear?" "The honest one." She let that rest between them, warm and frightening. "I am not Clara," she said. Pain crossed his face, but not anger. "No, I want men what she left by becoming her. I don't want you to." "What do you want?" He looked down at his hat, turning the brim once in his hands. "I want breakfast with less silence," he said. "I want Ruthie to stop counting thunder. I want Micah to be a boy before he's grown. I want Jasper to quit putting frogs where they don't belong, though I expect that's beyond prayer. I want to come in from the barn and find the house not waiting to accuse me of surviving." Olive's eyes filled. "And you?" she asked. His voice dropped. "I want to know if you'd sit on the porch with me when there's no chore making you." She could not answer for a moment. Then she stood, took the bundle, and placed it back on the shelf. "I can sit a while," she said. He nodded, and if his hand trembled on the hat brim, she had the grace not to mention it. They sat on the porch until the lamp burned out. They did not touch. They did not need to. The night held enough. News from Red Willow arrived a week later. Sheriff Harlan came with Samuel Bell, Clara's brother, a red-haired man with tired eyes and a preacher's patience. They brought statements from 2 women and a clerk who had worked under Pritchard. The debts were false. The accusations were a pattern. Pritchard had left town suddenly after the wire, claiming business in Fort Worth. Olive listened in the kitchen, one hand on the back of a chair. "You owe him nothing," Samuel said. "If he troubles you again, he'll find more than one county interested." The relief did not come soft. It came sharp, almost painful, like blood returning to a numb hand. Levi stood beside the stove, close but not crowding. Sheriff Harlan removed his hat. "Miss Chandler, I owe you an apology for coming heavy with another man's word." Olive looked at him. "Then give the next woman questions before cuffs." The sheriff bowed his head. "I will." After they left, Olive went to the hen shawl alone. Red Mary pecked her shoe. The hens clucked and shifted, unconcerned with reputations. Olive laughed once, then covered her mouth because the laugh broke into sobs. Levi found her sitting on an overturned crate, crying into her apron with a hen staring at her like a disappointed aunt. He did not tell her not to cry. He did not ask what was wrong when he knew. He sat on the feed bin across from her and waited. I hated that I almost believed him, she said into the cloth. Levi's voice was low, a lie repeated near hunger starts wearing truth's coat. She lowered the apron. Did you make that up? No, sounds too wise. Probably stole it from some old trail cook. She laughed wetly. Red Mary hopped onto the crate beside Olive and pecked at her apron string. Olive looked at the hen, then at Levi. The absurdity of being comforted in a hen house after being cleared of theft overtook her, and laughter came again, fuller this time. Levi smiled, not almost, not hidden, a real smile, weary and beautiful in its rarity. Olive's heart moved toward him like a plant toward light. The drought held into August. Everything became dust and waiting. Cattle bawled near empty tanks. The creek ran thin over stones. Levi sold 20 head and came home with his face carved by disappointment. It was not enough. Pike returned on the hottest day of the month. This time he brought papers ready. Olive watched from the porch as Levi read them. His jaw set. Pike's voice floated clear. Unless full arrears are paid by Friday, the bank will begin proceedings on the north pasture. Friday was 3 days away. Levi folded the papers. I understand. Pike glanced toward Olive with a banker's polite contempt. Domestic improvements do not satisfy notes. Mr. Drake Olive stepped down from the porch. Neither do insults. Yet you spend them freely. Pike blinked. Levi gave her a look, but there was no rebuke in it. When Pike left, the ranch seemed to shrink under the sky. They counted everything that night. The tobacco tin, the jar money, the cattle sale. What could be borrowed, sold, delayed, still short by $86. Levi sat at the table long after the children went to bed. Olive stood by the stove, twisting a dish towel. I can sell the South team, he said. You need them. I can sell the piano. Olive turned. What piano? In the parlor, under canvas. Clarice. Olive had thought it a table covered for dust. No, it's worth my eBay 40. Ruthie hasn't even heard it. Ruthie needs land more. Does she need her mother erased piece by piece to keep it? Levi flinched. That's not fair. No. Olive came to the table and sat. It isn't. I'm sorry. He rubbed both hands over his face. I don't know what else to sell. Olive knew. The knowledge had sat in her all evening like a stone. She went to the back room and took her mother's letter from its cloth, wrapped. Behind it lay a small gold ring, plain, worn thin, her mother's wedding ring. Olive had kept it through hunger, through Pritchard, through nights under trees. It was the last thing from a love that had once made a home. She returned and set it on the table. Levi stared at it. No, you don't know what I am offering. Yes, I do. It might bring $20. No, Levi, no, Levi. No, his refusal angered her, because it was tenderness could be foolish. This land feeds your children. That ring is yours. My mother is not in the ring. Fan Clara isn't in the piano. She stopped. His eyes held hers, pained but steady. See, he said softly. We both know how it sounds when someone else says it. Olive closed her hand around the ring. Tears stung. I want to help. You have not enough. He reached across the table, then stopped before touching her, asking without words. She turned her hand palm up. He laid his fingers over hers, rough and warm. Olive, he said, you are not here to be spent. The ring pressed between their palms. That sentence undid something old in her. She bowed her head over their joined hands. The next morning, Micah disappeared. At first, they thought he was in the barn, then at the creek, then at the south fence. By noon, Levi found the note under the broken-eared horse on the mantle. "I'm going to Aunt Lydia. She can use me. Sell my pony. Keep the pasture. Tell Ruthie I ain't mad." Levi read it once and went white. Olive was already reaching for her bonnet. "He took Dusty?" she asked. Jasper nodded, crying openly now. "I told him not to. He said I was a baby." Levi saddled in silence so fierce it frightened the horses. Olive filled canteens, wrapped biscuits and boiled eggs in cloth, and put the blue cup in her apron without thinking. Ruthie clung to the porch post, eyes huge. "Bring him home," she whispered. Levi looked at Olive. "You stay with the children." "No, this rye, my go hard. Then it needs someone." Thinking soft, he opened his mouth, closed it, nodded. They rode south under a brutal sun, following small hoof marks along the old road. Dust-coated Olive's tongue. Mesquite scratched her skirt when they cut across a draw. Levi's fear showed only in the way he leaned forward, as if his body could outrun time. They found Dusty 3 miles from Willow Creek, reins tangled in brush, saddle empty. Levi swung down before his horse stopped. "Micah." No answer. Olive saw tracks in the dry mud near the creek bed. Boys' boots, sliding, a smear where someone had fallen. Levi. They followed the bank down to a stand of cottonwoods. Micah lay in the shade, curled around his left arm, face gray with pain. His canteen was empty. Blood streaked his temple. Levi dropped to his knees. "Son." Micah's eyes fluttered. "Didn't get far, no. I was gonna help." Levi's face broke. He gathered the boy carefully, then seemed afraid to hold too tight. Olive knelt and checked Micah's arm. Broken, likely. The head cut bled, but not deep. Heat exhaustion had him shaking. "You found me?" Micah whispered. Levi brushed dust from his son's hair with a hand that had gentled horses and held grief too long. "Always." Olive took a boiled egg from the cloth. Micah turned away weakly. "Can't I, yes," she said. She took the blue tin cup from her apron, cracked the egg, mashed the yolk with a little salt from her packet, and a few drops of water until it softened. It was a foolish vessel for trail medicine, but it fit in her palm like memory. "Small bite," she said. Micah looked at the cup, world remembering. Olive's voice trembled. "Every stubborn inch of you." He ate. Levi watched, tears cutting clean lines through dust on his face. They made a sling from Olive's petticoat hem and rode home slow, Levi holding Micah before him in the saddle. By the time the ranch appeared, Ruthie and Jasper were at the gate with Samuel Bell, who had come by chance and stayed by mercy. Micah healed over the next weeks with the crankiness of a boy who hated needing help. Olive kept him fed. Levi sat by his bed at night, sometimes speaking, sometimes only listening. Once Olive heard Micah say, "I thought if I left, you'd have less to carry." Levi's answer came rough. "Children ain't weight. They're why a man carries." Olive stood in the hall with a folded towel against her chest and cried silently, where no one could see. The money problem remained, but Samuel Bell had seen enough during Micah's rescue and the days after to ask questions. He rode to town, spoke with Harlan, then with men at the rail depot. He returned with news that changed the air in the kitchen. The railroad cookhouse wants preserves, pickled eggs, dried beans, and bread twice weekly through winter. "If you can supply steady," he said, "they'll advance half on contract." Levi looked at Olive. Olive looked at the shelf where the 2 egg cups sat side by side. "How much advance?" she asked. Samuel named a figure, enough to pay Pike. "Barely, blessedly, enough." Levi sat down as if his knees had forgotten pride. Ruthie began to dance. Jasper whooped. Micah, pale but healing in the rocker, said, "Told you eggs could save us." "No, you didn't," Jasper said. "I thought it." Olive laughed until tears came. The contract required a public signing at the bank because Pike insisted on witnessing the payment and making it sour if he could. Levi wore his black coat. Olive wore a clean gray dress with new cuffs she had sewn by lamplight. Ruthie insisted Olive carry the blue egg cup, for luck, so Olive tucked it in her basket beneath the first jar of pickled eggs bound for the depot. Pike counted the money twice. His mouth was thin. "Well," he said, "Mr. Drake appears to have been rescued by poultry." Levi took the receipt. "No." Pike glanced up. Levi turned, not to the banker but to the men and women lingering in the bank lobby, all pretending not to listen. Mrs. Abel stood near the door. Mr. Tully held a parcel. Sheriff Harlan leaned by the window. "I was helped by Olive Chandler," Levi said. "Clear enough for every year. She kept accounts better than I did, worked harder than most men I've hired, fed my children, saved my son on the trail, and turned a henhouse into enough money to keep Drake Ranch whole. The first day I found her, she was hungry enough to take eggs. I told her to stay and work for them instead. Best bargain I ever made." Olive could not breathe. Pike shuffled papers. "Sentiment is not necessary." "No," Levi said. "Truth is." Mrs. Abel's face colored. The sheriff hid a smile. Mr. Tully suddenly found the floor fascinating. Levi faced Olive then, and the public room fell away. He did not kneel. He did not perform. That would not have been him. He simply took the blue tin egg cup from her basket and held it in his scarred hand before all of them. "You once said the world doesn't owe remembering," he said. "Maybe not, but a home does. I want this home to remember you every morning. It has eggs. Every evening it has bread. Every year the pasture holds green." Her eyes burned. "Levi," she whispered, "I'm not asking because I need work from you. I'm asking because I want life with you. If you can love a stubborn man, 3 grieving children, judgmental hens, and a ranch that still owes more than it should, I would be honored to marry you." The bank was silent. Olive thought of her mother's letter. "Do one useful thing. Make the world remember by morning." She looked at Levi Drake, who had seen her in straw and shame, and had given her not pity, but a place to stand. She looked at Ruthie holding Samuel's hand, at Jasper bouncing on his heels, at Micah trying not to smile, because his dignity was still in a sling too. Then she took the blue cup from Levi and set it on the bank counter. "Yes," she said, "but I am keeping accounts." Laughter broke through the room, warm and startled. Levi's smile came slow. "I was counting on it. They married in September under the live oak by the house, because Olive said churches were fine, but shade was practical." Reverend Bell spoke the words. Ruthie wore a ribbon the color of cornflowers. Jasper dropped the ring once and blamed a gopher. Micah stood beside Levi, his arms still bound but his back straight. Mrs. Abel came. She brought a pie and an apology so stiff it could have stood in the corner by itself, but Olive accepted both. Pritchard never returned. Pike sent no gift, which everyone considered generous. After the vows, there was a meal laid across 2 tables in the yard. Beans with salt pork, biscuits soft enough to make Ruthie proud, peach butter with crooked labels, fried chicken, coffee that no longer tasted like punishment, and eggs pickled in jars that shone gold in the late sun. At sunset, when guests had gone and the children slept worn out in clean beds, Olive stepped into the kitchen and found the shelf above the sill changed. Levi had made it wider. On it sat Clara's rose china cup, mended crack turned toward the light. Beside it sat Olive's blue tin cup, dent and all. Between them was a new wooden egg cup, small and plain, carved smooth. On its side, Levi had burned one word with careful, uneven letters. "Home?" Olive touched it with one finger. "From the porch," Levi said. "Too much?" She turned. He stood in the doorway, hat off, hair ruffled, looking more nervous than he had facing bankers, storms, or blood. "No," she said. "Just enough." And he came to stand beside her. Outside, the last light lay over the yard. The hens muttered in their house. Horses shifted near the corral. Somewhere down the hall, Ruthie sighed in sleep, and Jasper mumbled nonsense, and Micah hushed him like a little old man. Olive took one brown egg from the basket on the table and placed it in the new wooden cup. Then, after a moment, she moved it to the blue tin cup. "First one stays there," she said, for remembering, Levi's hand found hers. This time neither asked and neither pulled away. Years later, folks in that part of Texas still told how Levi Drake caught Olive Chandler stealing eggs and gave her work instead of disgrace. Some told it like a lesson in mercy. Some told it like a romance. The children told it like the beginning of their real home. But Olive, when asked, would smile toward the kitchen sill where the old blue cup still waited each morning, and say the truth was simpler than any telling. She had reached for an egg because hunger had made her desperate, and a wounded cowboy had looked past the theft long enough to see the woman. From that small mercy came bread on the table, curtains in the windows, laughter after thunder, and a family that remembered one another every morning. The hens began to sing.